Hello, and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds, I'm Nerdicus Dave. Today I'm joined by B. Dave Walters. How are you doing today, sir?
Uh, Great. Had last second panic inducing tech snafu there that I'm
Yeah, yeah.
going to have to wrestle with, but we got it. We got it going. So here we are.
Yeah, actually, with all your gesturing and miming there, you're making me a little nervous.
Because I was a little nervous that it's like, hey, 5 minutes to go time and the computer won't detect the mic. Cool,
Yeah.
cool, 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 cool. Let's see where this goes.
uh,
Yeah,
you
nope.
know,
Hey, got it sorted out though. Here we are.
if we didn't have things like that happen, would we even be doing it live?
Here's the thing. I'm a very patient person. It takes very much to like ruffle me, but I worked IT for a long time, and when things don't work like they're supposed to, especially when expensive things don't work like they're supposed to,
Yeah.
that is like 5,000 RPMs like that. But that's all right. We got there. We got there. No, it's supposed to be a happy occasion. So
when
Becca
those
and argue.
when those things
Yeah.
happen to hear in your own mind, have you tried turning it off and back on again?
Mm. I try that first. Yeah. No, just I actually think I have a defective device. Actually, I have a USB-C splitter that I got for the microphone, and was
Yeah.
working well. I was very happy with it, and then it started disconnecting and reconnecting, just kind of all on its own. And then last night I went through and just poked around with the drivers, which is of course always a minefield, and
Yeah.
thought I had it sorted. And then came on today, hopping on, like here we go. And my computer's like bold of you to assume you think you have a microphone. And yeah, so I know what I'm gonna be doing when we're done with this. That's okay.
Yeah. I love when I go to do something and I haven't changed anything, but for some reason, like OBS is like, I'm going to reset everything now
Yeah,
for
not
you.
today. Yeah, not
Yeah.
today. Yep.
Yeah.
Hey, how you doing over there, sir?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Like I said, this is the nature of the beast. So you just recently started a new live stream show, right?
I'm afraid you have to be more specific.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I guess the folks from Idle Champion had reached out to us and they're like, "Hey, B Dave is doing a thing. Do you want to talk about the thing?" And I'm like, while we do a show, I'd love to have him back on again to chat again. I enjoyed talking with you last time and hanging out.
Yeah, what we're doing is the Idle Champions presents streams. It's 2 3-parters. The first parter is done. Just this past Monday, we wrapped on the Unfair Seas, which is Christina Ariel, Mark Mir, and Aaron M. Evans, and 2 guests. For the first part was Vivid Vivka and Luke Gygax. Where they had to go to a small coastal town called Echo Bay for Fleet's Wake for a silky smooth and uneventful 3-part shopping episode, which isn't what happened at all. It's what they wanted to happen, but cultists of Umberley had some different plans, and
You had to shut it down.
as they are wont to do. Yeah. The first 3 parts are up on Twitch already, on the C&E Games Twitch that you could catch. They might all be on YouTube by now. And then starting this next Monday is the next part of 3, which I don't think I'm supposed to announce yet, but I might go ahead and tell you. It's gonna be fine. Again, another silky smooth and uneventful shopping episode of where they just roll into town and everything's gonna be fine, and it's gonna be super happy fun time for like 3 weeks. Except that is not at all what's going to happen. But yeah, 4 o'clock Pacific on twitch.tv/CNE Games. And what's made these unusual is inside of Idle Champions, you can go and you can vote to affect the stream. You can go and vote to affect like what's going to happen to them, whether or not they're going to have someone helping them or hindering them. You can give advantage to some players. You can give a D6 bonus to some players. You can affect the difficulty of the challenges and the foes they'll face. All of this inside of Idle Champions. So it's kind of a transmedia experience as well, where it's the game affects the stream and the stream affects the game.
Do you find that the viewers, the fans, are coming down more on the side of you and the monsters or the players?
Believe it or not, it was split pretty evenly. Like I expected just, crushing brutality from the votes, because that's usually I find what happens in a lot of these things. But it was 50-50. Like in the last episode, for instance, it was like make the monster as hard as possible, but also send them help. Like it really it like
Yeah.
it balanced out. So I was happy to see how it went. I'm always happy for infinite tentacles, which was one of the votes. So
Infinite tentacles. That just sounds bad and Japanesey.
Be a great band name though.
Yeah. And they're playing the Idol Champion characters.
Yes, they are playing. Christina was Ariza, Mark is Baloth the Entertainer, Aaron is Havilar, Vivka was Black Viper, and Luke was Melf, and also had my own Lucky Boy Freely there. So it's like literally a formation you could play on Idol Champions. Was the group that was there.
Nice.
And it was an opportunity to get both an idea of the personality of these characters and also what they actually do in a fight, which was interesting to see work out as well. Their own unique combinations of skills and tactics was very, very interesting to see.
So will these stories ever maybe work their ways into the game?
I certainly hope so. Well, that's kind of it kind of comes both ways in that the Unfair Seas adventure that we just ran is an event that is happening in Idle Champions right now, or I guess it might be done by now, going into the next one that's about to happen. So yeah, you could actually take these heroes and go and play them in the game and experience it for yourself and deal with a lot of the same challenges they dealt with. Much far amplified on the stream. And there's going to also be a written adventure that is published that might already be available. If it's not available yet, it will be soon. We also can play it at home. The written adventure is aimed for level 3. They were level 9, so I definitely ramped it up a bit. But yeah, you can experience it both as a video game and at your table.
Yeah, it sounds like you'd have to ramp it up a little bit.
Well, the reason why I did not want to do too low a level is I wanted the characters to have some options and resources and get an idea of what they're like. Like we could say it's Baloth the Entertainer, but if he's level 3 and has 4 spell slots or something, like you're not really gonna.
It's not as impressive.
Yeah, exactly.
You like running higher level games anyway. Is the impression that I get. I could be wrong.
Level 20 is my jam. No, that's where I live. That's my niche. Yeah. Like to come down from the lofty heights to run like other lower level games is like, okay, I guess.
The last time you were on here in the morning, the morning for you. And then later that afternoon or evening, you were running a level 20 game.
Yeah, that sounds like something I do. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like something I do. Yeah, this well, today, no level 20 games today. But yeah, I heard a statistic that in D&D Beyond, fewer than 5% of the campaigns had level 20 characters in them. And that's not even counting how few games play from level 1 to level 20. That's just has a level 20 character. And that was kind of one of the things that I did. One, quite frankly, as a point of competitive differentiation. And two, to show people that the game is not... Like I run into this idea a lot of times that like the game ends at 20. Like you're like, oh, I hit 20. We're done. We're making new characters. And I'm like, no, there's maybe it's my martial arts background, because I find a lot of non-martial artists think, well, you have a black belt, you're finished. It's like, no, you have a black belt. That means you've started. So to me, getting to a level 20 character just means now you've basically unlocked all the content to play at the end game. And I think combine that with the fact that I was a big MMO raider person, where again, the actual fun was at the end game. It just made sense to me to be able to bring that to D&D. And because the game is actually more lethal at low levels than it is at high levels. You have so many options and resources and get out of jail free cards and ways to save yourself at level 20. But level 1 or 2, a kobold with a battle axe that crits is gonna like one shot you, So
it's happened in our games.
I
think it was like our first or second session, and we were the GM, like the monster manual wasn't out. I think only the player's handbook was out at the time, and Ted was running. He's like, 4 orcs and I like made up imps because they don't exist yet from this scorpion stat block. That should be fine. They're second level. They can handle that. And 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 they
Narrator
just
voice, they cannot.
no, well, and we learned a few things in that game. One, you always carry a healer's kit, uh, which we didn't. But we had one of the players go down. They, failed their first death save. Someone failed a medicine check. No healer's kit. No healing spells. And their next death save was a 1. So it was just over.
It's a wrap. Welcome
Yeah.
to 5th edition. Yeah.
In 3rd edition, did you play a lot of Epic?
Oh yeah. Well, but I mean, the 3rd edition had a different problem, 3 and 3.5, which then Pathfinder inherited. That the high end game turned into Rocket Tag, where you're like, oh, we're literally gods now. Oh, we're actually gods. Oh, okay, yeah, sure, yeah. So it's I'm level it went up to level 30, but what was it? Divine points? Was that the mechanic that you got? Where the gods had like an actual...
I don't know. We never played. We never really played. We never played epic level. Our campaigns never lasted long enough. We were perpetually restarting.
Yeah, most don't, but I think in Pathfinder I ran a game from 1 to level 20 with all 10 mythic tiers. In D&D, I think in 3.5, I think we had one that got close, but I kind of won 3.5. I both won and lost 3.5. In that I had a character that was a druid, planar shepherd, with the saint template with the vow of peace, poverty, and nonviolence. And if you were there, you understand that means that character was basically unkillable. And it was funny because I set up ostensibly to make a character that could not die and succeeded at it. I really did do it. And it also was kind of massively unfulfilling to be like, I'm never at risk ever.
Yeah. I just love the DCs for that book for skills. It's like 120 to escape artist, a wall of force, and 80 DC 80 to swim up a waterfall. Like the ridiculousness of it.
I mean, I think 5th edition has done a much better job of kind of keeping a lid on it, because what killed 3.5 was unintended consequences, where they'd put out books where it's like, oh, okay, on Monday you have +10 to attack. And if you're wearing black, you have +10 to damage. And if your mom's name was Susan, you have an extra 46 sneak attack. And then there was all these like extra things. And then monsters like me would come along and be like, so let me get this straight. As long as we fight at midnight on Tuesday and he's wearing garlic and, my mom is there and one of us is wearing roller skates, I get an extra 42 attack guaranteed crit plus 46 plus 46 plus 46. Great. Cool. Let's do it. And once you've seen it, you couldn't unsee it. So
or using the bladed gauntlet and being able to crit half the time, like
the hulking hurler, and hit someone with the planet. You're like, technically I hit you with the planet. That's my attack this round. Just I always love the visual, the idea of just like, you have like a goblin or something that does what you think is a handstand, and all of Toro goes like and like right onto someone's head. Yeah. So 5th edition is far more elegant in its solutions.
Yeah, it's gotten better. Although after being around for a little bit, their DC 30 Impossible is a little off. Because we do a lot of builds on our channel, and we've definitely doubled that. So with specific builds. And granted too, you need all the stars to align and characters to go to 20th level. But that's one of the things, like over time, as the new books come out, you just start stacking more stuff on.
Well, Vivka with Black Viper, she got north of 30 multiple times over the course because they're a rogue, all those rogue bonuses. And then, you roll well. And she was level 9. Yeah. So that's, very easy to do. But that's one of the things also, I'd never tell what the difficulty level is. I'm like, you roll, I know, and if for some reason 30 is not enough. It's not enough. Or maybe you get 29 and yet it does work this time, that can, whatever the narrative requires. Because otherwise, yeah, you reach a point that you can't challenge them at all. Like in the aforementioned Pathfinder games, everybody became so powerful and the action economy was so lopsided in favor of the characters. I got to the point like I wouldn't even count the monster's health till round 3. Like, again, unless they just had excellent tactics or an anomalous number of crits. Like, I just knew the creature wasn't going to die in the first 2 rounds. Otherwise, literally every fight would be just like
over.
Zerg Rush. Yeah. Well, because it doesn't have legendary actions in Pathfinder. And the monster might have 4 attacks, but so does each of the players. So you got 4 to 6 players. That's 20, 20 to 30 attacks the monster's got to endure, all of which are going to hit because they're stupid to pluses, and then all have all these like crazy things they do, and then the monster hopefully fights back.
There's been many times that my monsters have exploded in the first round. They don't even get to do anything. I roll my dice in the open, and I just play it the way they lie. And there's been many times I was like, wow, it took me longer to make that monster because you know how 3rd edition was with templates and stuff. I'm like, it took me longer to make that monster than it did for you guys to annihilate it and turn it into goo.
In the Search for Gaxmore, the lead up to GaryCon game that I just did for Luke Gygax's GaryCon, which is coming up at the end of the month, with Jason Charles Miller as the DM, and Abria Iyengar is in the game, and I'm playing a divination wizard grave cleric, and the big bad of the first session showed up, and I marked it with the path to the grave where you make it susceptible to damage. And Abria cast a max level guiding bolt, and then she rolled a 20 on it, so it was like 4 times damage, and that was basically how he narrated it, because she killed it like 4 times over. She killed it 5 times over, and it's like it's there, and then she's not there. Like there's not even blood left, just like like eradicated from existence.
Yeah, we've got a build based off of inflict wounds and that ability, and with some fighter levels mixed in for action surge, so you can do it all in 1 round. And also, so one of the players in our games is playing that build, and they're also a hexblade, so they have the increased threat range. I think that came up, and they did 180 points of damage, and the best part was the monster had like 2 hit points left.
It's a build. It's a build after my own heart. Yeah, I'm like the Gloomstalker Ranger Grave Cleric Assassin Rogue, for a similar thing. You just catch them flat-footed, and then just I think if you stack
I love
it
those
all
players as a DM. That's the one you try and charm, or dominate.
Exactly. Well, and also I think people hear these stories and they're like, why would you ever allow that? And it's like, because so many things have to go right. Like so many things have to go right for you to have like a shining moment in the sun where you do something spectacular. And to me, that's what these games are for. And then also, yes, to do everything in my power to like twist and corrupt that, where they're like, yay, everything's fine. I'm like, it isn't though. Yep. I will say also, just when in doubt, DMs, if you ever run into problems with like the characters that are really too powerful and you're having trouble challenging them, attack them with their own group. Attack them with 3 of their own group. Here's 4 illusory duplicates of all of you. Roll initiative. There you go. You can see what it's like. So yeah, there's always a solution. There's always a bigger fish.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely come up where we've had to fight shadow selves in a game, so let the players know what it's like being on the other side of the screen, essentially.
Especially when you switch it up, they don't necessarily have to like fight themselves. It's like, no, here's your whole other group, and the rogue disappears and everybody's like, oh no, we know what he's gonna do. Oh no.
The foreshadowing.
There
was 2 sessions back to back. One was like something that I wrote, and one was just an adventure that I was running. And it just so happened that like I ran the one and I did end up like dominating their heavy hitter. And they're like, so do I gotta like attack my party or do I have to attack my party? I'm like, you know what? I will leave it up to you. And then he just like, I think he was a Ranger Battle Master Goblin. And then he just unloaded like all of his battle dice and his action surge and dropped like two of the players. And then it happened to him in the very next session, which was a module. So I didn't really know that that was coming.
Mhm.
And I usually like for that kind of stuff will roll random to see who it affects, or it's very much based off of like who did what last, and then like the NPCs or monsters will just kind of react to them.
I'm very much from the monsters know what they're doing school of thought. If it's an intelligent creature, it should act intelligently. And it's like, you, big, strong person wrapped in metal, probably don't have the mental fortitude. You're coming with me, just like the same way you do it to the monsters, like especially if you have a higher level difficulty creature, stands to reason it's been around the block for a minute, and it's like, well, here's why. Also, that squishy person in the back wrapped in cloth, they're the actual dangerous one, go after them. Yeah, makes sense. Again, the monsters should have their own tactics. Also, shout out to my buddy Keith Amon's books, The Monsters Know What They're Doing. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. And Live to Tell. Yep. And Live to Tell the Tale, the tactics book. Also very good stuff.
Yeah. Oh, well, one of my favorite things too is like if you have a cleric that keeps popping up, the players, after they go down, my monsters are definitely like, fuck that guy.
Him in particular. At that point. Yeah. That one in particular. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Also, you can counterspell heals. You can counterspell resurrection. You want to see a combination of hate and fear in someone's eyes. Counterspell the resurrection spell.
Yeah, well, we don't play high enough to see that, but the heal spell, the healing magic for sure. And that is definitely when you do that, they're just like, oh, you're such a dick. Mm-hmm. It's such a dick move.
You're like, hey, look, man, you're the one that came to fight a Sararak, not me,
Yeah, I had them fighting this Myconid like vampire lich creature.
Evil lich.
And it kept healing. You until it got hit by radiant damage, and the cleric was hit with radiant damage. So it was really angry at the cleric, dropped the cleric, and then stomped on him once while he was down. So, only once, he didn't do twice, So
very valid, very valid. That's always the theater of the mind of it all. That it's like if a wild animal is attacking you, is it going to like comprehend? It's like, oh, you're unconscious but in death saves and therefore no longer a threat, and I'll let go, or is it gonna keep going?
Yeah, for animals, my rule of thumb is they try and make off with your body. They may not be attacking you currently, but they are trying to. They're like, all right, we're going to take this meal to go.
Mm-hmm. The jaguar makes it up the tree.
Yeah. So what do you got going on nowadays? Besides the Idle Champions stream.
Man, what don't I have going on? The weird thing is next week, 3 new shows premiere, only 2 of which are announced. So Mondays at 11 is Champions of Lore. This is all Pacific, all times Pacific. Champions of Lore on C&E Games that I do with Aaron M. Evans and Trevor Bettis, where we talk about just the lore and background and context of D&D, and we just nerd out and have a good time. Then at 4 Pacific is Idle Champions Presents. Like I said, the first arc of 3 is done, but the second arc of 3 is about to begin. So Monday is a great time to jump on. They're also re-airing the past episodes after Champions of Lore. So like we're on at 11, and then I think at 12 they re-air the past ones. Then Tuesdays next week, Heroes of the Plains is starting, where Freely's going to return, and that whole gang from Heroes of the Veil and then Beyond Heroes, we're together again. But we're gonna be traveling across space and time. Apparently, I've become like Freely at this point. Like Todd keeps trying to tell me all the details and like asking me all these things, and it's like he's just happy to be there, man. Like I don't know. Like it's like, where would Freely be? Where wouldn't he be? I don't know. Like what started as a gag of the first time the first couple times he was a guest character, he just showed up places. Then when we went to Wildmount, he literally fell out of the sky. Then in Silver and Steel, he literally fell out of the sky. And like that's my conceit. He just shows up places now. Like he falls, even he doesn't know why he's there. Then
Why
Wednesday
does this keep happening?
he didn't even question it. He didn't even question it. Like it's where I'm supposed to be. Let's go. Then which is funny because that means Freely will be on the Idol Champions Presents and Heroes of the Plains at the same time. Then next Wednesday we got a show that isn't announced yet. Don't know why it's not announced, but it isn't. And then coming up soon, the Black Dice Society will be starting, but we're still just vague booking about that. We've revealed who it is, but not what it is. Yeah, and just all sorts of other like charity things. Like Gary Con, be running a game for Gary Con with JCM. Like I said, Saturday nights we got 2 more episodes of the Road to Gaxmore, which is at 6 Pacific. We did 1 episode. We got 2 more of that. I'm doing a game at Gary Con. Yeah, just always something. Just follow me on the tweetagrams at B Dave Walters. That's the easiest way. Like I don't expect anybody to try and keep up with everything I'm doing. I barely keep up with it, and I'm there for all of it.
It's a lot of gaming. At what point is it too much gaming?
At the height of my Patreon, I was running 30 to 35 games a month, in addition to the streaming. So I was running. I was having about 40 to 45 sessions a month, of which 30 to 35 were Patreon games. That was a lot. Can't say I recommend that.
No, thank you.
That's a lot. That was a lot. Well, but I mean, it had to be done. It's a champagne problem that is like, oh, too many people want to play with me.
Yeah.
But that started to add up. I did that for about 18 months. And yeah, that started to add up. So apparently quite a bit is before it's too much is the answer.
That is a lot. And 18 months, I mean, how do you have time to do anything else at that point?
Yeah, I kind of didn't, up to and including sleeping, because that's most of the day was running sessions, and then still had to do everything else. Still had streams, still had writing gigs, still had the trying to maintain a sane human life. It kind of didn't. But hey, there's 168 hours in a week. You can fit in a lot if you plan it right.
What are you working on these days in the writing sphere?
I can't tell you any of it. I'm like, NDA, and NDA. Yeah. Well, I will say,
no one's listening. It's just me, you, and the internet.
Yeah, that's all. It's forever. Well, Into the Motherlands, I'm lead developer for the Into the Motherlands game. Getting ready for our Kickstarter for that, and releasing our base book hopefully later this year. That's been occupying an increasingly high amount of my time, which is good. Trying to decide if we're going to stick with the Cortex system, if we're going to try and do something created from scratch, which has its own pluses and minuses, and just trying to create something, that is rich for people to get lost in. And also just a shout out to the Wagadu Chronicles. I'm not working on that game, but I got to play it, and I've met the founder, Alan. It's really great. The game's really great. The book's really beautiful. The Kickstarter's done. It funded fabulously, but you can still lay back it. So highly recommend the Wagadu Chronicles also.
Cool. So the Motherland, what is that?
Oh, so Into the Motherlands is it is a POC centric original game. We've done season 1 at the Twitch stream already happened. Season 2 is coming soon, probably going to start right at the end of this month, probably, maybe, I don't know. Don't hurt me, Tanya, if I've said something I wasn't supposed to say. But season 2 is going to start soon. It is Tanya DePass, DJ Knight, Christina Ariel, and Michael Kritz with Eugenio Vargas as the storyteller, which word is Eugenio.
I do. He's an amazing GM.
I love him. He's the sweetest boy. Yeah. It was the core conceit of the story was we wanted to be able to tell a fantasy story completely freed from the impact and influences of colonialism. And so the inciting incident is in the 14th century. There's an African emperor named Mansa Musa, who was a real person, was arguably the richest man in history, who sent an expeditionary fleet to the New World. The common consensus is they never arrived. They just didn't make it across the Atlantic. Personally, I think they did make it across the Atlantic and became the Olmecs. But for our purposes, for reasons that have yet to be revealed, this fleet was transported to a different planet 2,000 years ago. And now when the story starts, it is still 1,000 years past now. So this culture has been here on this planet for 3,000 years and has grown and diversified into lots of different types of people and places, different alien races. It is a spacefaring culture, and they go across the galaxy exploring and doing things. And it's been really great. It's sci-fi with fantasy elements, but it's definitely a science fiction story.
Okay, cool. That sounds like fun. Did you say you're running that with Cortex?
So currently on the stream we use Cortex.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we're very happy with Cortex also. It's just when by the time we get to the point that we're ready to publish something, it's like, it gets weird at that point, rights, permissions, this, that, so
yeah, maybe juggling.
Mm-hmm.
I got that.
Well, it's, at the end of the day, our commitment is to give the best possible experience we can give to the players that are going to experience the game. Whatever it takes to make that happen is what we will do. But we are prepping for a Kickstarter. Probably the show's probably going to start right at the end of this month. Kickstarter's probably going to land next month, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I've not played Cortex yet. I've poked around at the rules a little bit, and it's definitely a game that seems like it can be as simple and rules light as you want, or as complicated as you want.
Yeah, there's definitely a sliding scale of crunch. 100%. 100%. Yeah, but personally, I think that's one of the things I like about it, because what it allowed us to do in season 1 of the stream is they were playing the game as we were writing it, and that it would come up and like they'd encounter a difficulty or something that they couldn't fix, and I'd be watching and literally writing the new rules for it, and just kind of like introducing increasing levels of complexity as they went along, and adding more and more to the characters and the things they could do, which was nice. It is definitely what you want to make it, and there's a lot of different ways to scratch any itch that you might have, which is nice. Cam Banks is a genius, and what he did with Cortex is really something special. And the book is gorgeous, by the way. The book is I was about to reach for it and show it to you, but it's at arm's reach. It's over there. The only one that is within arm's reach is the one that is always within arm's reach, which is Vampire.
Nice.
So, yep, but highly recommended.
So, do you have a preferred RPG?
So this always gets me into trouble because, quite frankly, I get paid to play some games. Obviously, I live first and foremost between 5th edition and Vampire, and just the World of Darkness in general are kind of the two mountains that I live atop. But I will say a game that has always had a very special place in my heart and I love dearly is Battle Lords of the 23rd Century. Which just released a new edition last year, and I did a short run stream to help launch that last year. Battle Lords. It's like Aliens meets the Fifth Element, and it just makes me smile every time I even think about that game.
Yeah, what is that rule? I'm not familiar with the game. What is the rule system for that one?
It's theirs. It's all proprietary. It's kind of it's a percentile system. You want to get under your number type deal. The reason why I like it is so again, it's kind of Aliens meets the Fifth Element. It's very the game always stays very lethal because you're a space marine essentially. Usually there's other things you can play, but for the most part that's what you are. And your character advances by your skills increase. You make more money. When you make more money, you buy better equipment. So the game can go from a fairly street level type, we got flak jackets and 9 millimeters game, to literally Star Wars, Star Destroyers, Voltron Force, mecha robots, battling in space, over time as it evolves. But a bullet is always a bullet. So
Yeah.
if somebody catches you out of your armor and you get shot in the face, it doesn't matter if you're level 1 or if you're level 100, you are going to die. So there's always an element of danger and risk, even in the 4-parter I ran for Q Times, which is up on YouTube, by the way. If you Google Battle Lords of the 23rd Century, you can watch the story we did. I expressly did all 4 parts separated years apart to show that the characters and their equipment had jumped, to give you an idea of the different ways the game could be played. And by the end, they did have some of their like giant mecha robots and spaceships and stuff. And I'm like, this is great until I wreck your robot and now you're on foot on a battlefield, and just like watch that fear set in. It's like, oh no,
We're naked.
we're so squishy.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's that one has a special place in my heart. And I mean, I think like everybody, I've bought so many base books for games I've never played. Look, I'm even today, as of the time of this, I guess we're live right now, but later today, I'm going to be recording a Crash Pandas game with some fun people that I've never played Crash Pandas. And I'm like, you know what? Tonight's the night. So yeah. It's I think though, especially for D&D in the World of Darkness, and then Battle Lords, that kind of scratches my fantasy itch, my horror itch, and my sci-fi itch. I did played a lot of the Fantasy Flight Star Wars game. Haven't played in a while, but used to play a lot of that. I think I prefer the West End games. Star Wars though, showing my age there.
I never actually played that one. I've only played the Fantasy Flight Star Wars.
It was a D6 system. It was like a less insane Shadowrun, basically. Shadowrun's a lot. Shadowrun's a part-time job. But it was essentially D6s, and as your skills improved, you just got to roll more D6s to do stuff. More or less. I mean, that's an oversimplification, but if you were good at something, you roll a big old handful of dice type thing. Yeah.
I feel like when I was a teen, we played like all the TSR games, and like every week we were playing a new game, right? And then I settled into like a group in my 20s, and we pretty much just played D&D. Because at that point, like we're all like starting families, had jobs, so like having the resources to dedicate to new hobbies and learning new games and the time just wasn't there.
Well, yeah, and I think I'm like, the kids today, they don't know how hard it was. It was difficult to make it to the hobby shop and buy a new game. I spent a lot of time playing Palladium games too, like Rifts and things of that nature. Like that's the one game that I played a whole lot coming up that I haven't written anything for is Rifts. Like I gotta get in touch with somebody at Palladium, so I'll do something for Rifts, and then I will have run the board.
Having checked that final box.
Yeah, man, of having contributed something to my formative games. But this like now this whole thing where there's 5,000 new board games every month, or every year. There's who knows how many TTRPGs every year. It didn't used to be like that. Like it did. I mean, there was like 10 or 15 new games a year. Now it's 10 or 15 new games a month. So it is an embarrassment of riches. It's a good problem to have. And it's just a matter of having an opportunity to kind of find your niche. Like Call of Cthulhu, you can't quite see it. It's down there below Trovis. I have the Call of Cthulhu in the Warhammer Fantasy starter sets. It's good to see Call of Cthulhu kind of having its renaissance. I'm hopeful that with Van Richten's guide, we're gonna see Ravenloft is gonna kind of get. I was gonna say get its place in the sun, but that's the last place Ravenloft wants to be. I see the old one down there on your shelf. I think Curse of Strahd did a good job of putting Ravenloft back on the map, but I think a lot of people thought it was just that, and so being able to show no, there's more to Ravenloft than this will be good.
The Domains of Dread box set was amazing back in the day.
I got so many. I don't have that one, but I got so many of the old second
Yeah,
edition box sets. I
I don't
love
have
those
them
things.
anymore.
Mhm.
I am cursed with this like thing. If I don't touch something in 6 months, I tend to get rid of it, and so I got rid of all that stuff, which I kind of regret now.
And it's anything that involves a book I will keep forever. Like I don't get rid of any books. I will get rid of other stuff, but I won't get rid of books. But what's funny though is I lived at an apartment. I moved and I'd been there about a year, and I had some boxes I hadn't opened. And one day I just took the boxes and I threw all of those out because I knew if I opened it, I was gonna be like, oh, of course I need this, blah
Yeah,
blah blah,
yeah,
But I'm like, not only have I made it fine without it, I don't even remember what it is. But
yeah.
but then I had the exact opposite experience where I just moved in December and I dug up a lot of like my boxes of books and things that I'd put away. And it was like looting lots of like it was opening chests that were all for me, and all designed to be things I would enjoy. That I'm like,
Uh,
oh, look at this.
a
Thanks,
hidden
past Dave.
treasure trove that you put there. Yeah. Well,
Mm-hmm.
also too, that's the other thing about books. Like when you start moving, you do a lot of moving, then you really understand how many books you have because they're like the heaviest thing to pack.
It's the cost of my move was probably doubled because they estimated it based on, they're like, how many rooms, how many people, it's gonna be take this long. And I'm like, bold of you to assume I don't have like 2,000 books. And now that's the thing. I keep looking over there because it's in the studio space. Like I have some shelves coming next week, and my hope was I was gonna be able to put everything up and kind of like display it and enjoy it for the first time. And I don't know, it's gonna be close. I got a lot of books. It's champagne problems, I suppose, of not being able to display all my wares. But that's my hope is I can do that and be able to put up some of the like neat things I've gotten over time. Like I have like all these like neat dragons and things from WizKids. Shout out to WizKids. Same with the Eye and Hand of Vecna and things like that I'd like to be able to put out. I've been gotten the deluxe editions of the Beetle and Grimm's things like Curse of Strahd. I'd like to be able to put that up. So we'll see. We'll see. So
So, what genre do you prefer? I mean, it sounds like you run them all, you play them all. Do you have a preference?
I like high level play.
Yeah,
I like games with maximum stakes. Of course, you can tell a very intimate, very compelling game of just trying to save one person, but I like stories where the fate of the world or the fate of many worlds hang in the balance. Because to me, and for my money, the reason why we play TTRPGs and the reason why video games will never completely replace them is it gives us to be at opportunity to be at cause in the narrative, that to have our actions or our inactions truly matter. You can get that to a certain extent with a video game, but you're largely on rails, even however big the sandbox is. For the most part, the monster's over there. And if you want more levels, got to go fight that monster. Like you could derp around in town all day if you want. But even then, if you're like, I want to rip the wagon wheel off this cart and go beat the shopkeeper to death with it, you can't. Like I want to nail the doors shut and burn it
yeah.
to the ground. You can't. Um, so I like that taken to its limit. The be it if it's in D&D, something that is going to affect the fate of the whole city or all of Faerun or all of the prime material plane. If it's in Vampire, I like playing, the very high stakes political game where if it's not the Elysium of the whole city, again, it's going to send ripples across all of vampire society is where I personally like to, tell my stories. But
Do you have advice for GMs that want to run those type of stories? Because I feel like those campaigns fall apart often when a GM has this really grand idea and he wants to start like at level one and this huge arching storyline.
yeah, I mean, understand that if you begin at the beginning, statistically speaking, you won't make it. Life is hectic and people are busy. If you're fortunate enough to do it, it can be very fulfilling. Um, I think contrary to what I just said, even though I said those are the stories that I like to play, that in and of itself is not what the game's about. And you always have to be mindful of this. And this is all storytelling in general, because, you know, I write screenplays, I write novels, I write graphic novels, published in all these different arenas. And you always have to keep asking yourself, what's the story about? When you hear people talk about a theme, that's what they mean. And a lot of times people confuse what happens with what the story's about. You know, like if I'm like, what's the story about? You're like, Sauron's come back. He wants the ring to conquer Mordor. I'm like, that's what happens. That isn't what the story is about. You know, what the story's about is, you know, with the Lord of the Rings, for example, things like duty, service, sacrifice, temptation, the corruptive nature of power. You know, quite frankly, a none too subtle commentary on racism, and also racism that Tolkien didn't realize he was still leaving in. Like, you get the like, maybe a dwarf and an elf can be friends, and I'm like, well, that was good, Tolkien, but also you made all of the dark-skinned people evil. But okay, you know, that's what those movies are about. You know, and it's the same with your story. As long as you are clear on the mental and emotional targets you're trying to hit in the players, and that is the game they want to play, then that is when you will have a very fulfilling experience for everybody. In D&D, you know, for the most part, I think most people know D&D is going to be fairly fighty, you know, but some people want a lighthearted romp story. Some people want minis and grids, you know, some people want, you know, grinding, hack and slash. And you can have elements of that in any game, but again, you know, get some buy-in from the players. So even with the Unfair Seas, I told everybody in advance, I'm like, all right, this is gonna be a fairly lighthearted, you know, thing. We're more here, it's more gonna be like a fun romp type thing. And then going into the third episode, I told them, I'm like, okay, so this has been a pretty lighthearted, fun romp, but you're gonna face a real challenge. Like, this is like, you're gonna be put up against something legit. And if you find a lighthearted solution, I'm open to it, but do know it's here to eat you. Like, you know,
did they find the lighthearted solution?
No, they sort of hit it head on. I mean, it was an appropriate by how they solved it. You know, vampires got the same problem where you'll always get the what we call the trench coat katana guy, you know, who's trying to play Blade, and you got somebody else that's trying to play, you know, Interview with a Vampire, and they can coexist and they can both have their moments to shine. But, you know, you do need to have some buy-in about what this game is. And I'll tell you, in another upcoming project I've got a horror project coming. And I got one of the cast members, and I was like, so understand this is going to be a dark, intense story. You know, even in the darkest and most intense of stories, you still can have humor because people get emotionally exhausted. You know, you can't laugh for 2 hours. You also can't cry for 2 hours. No one can. So, you know, you have to wave it, even if that wave is like largely waving up or largely waving down. And they were like, I just can't be serious for 2 or 3 hours. Like, I can't do it. And I'm like, but this is not going to be, you know, the derpy that's what she said game. Like, this is not the dick jokes game. Like, I need you to understand that. And they were like, yeah, but I'm like, no, that's not this game, you know? So what we did was we worked together to create their character to be almost a Tasselhot Burfoot-ish character, that they are the optimist, you know, in the midst of this non-optimistic setting. So if they feel the need where they just have to, you know, break the tension, at least it'll make sense contextually. You know what I mean? So yeah, that was a long way around to say, make sure you're clear on the story, that the actual story that you're trying to tell, and make sure that's the story that your players want to play. And if those two things are in place, you'll probably be all right. Oh, one last thing. I think a lot of times people get hung up with lore, especially when they're doing homebrew stuff. And people are like, I've got 5,000 years of history. I'm like, no one cares.
Yeah.
They don't. For 1,000 generations, the Jedi were the peacekeepers of the old Republic. That's it.
Give me the crib notes.
Yeah, that has spawned thousands of hours of content, from that single sentence. They're not interested in the fact that the god, cast down, Marduk cast down Tiamat from the heavens and created the 6 moons of your world. They don't care. Over time, as they're experiencing it, as it becomes relevant, then by the time they get there, they will care. Like eventually you get to Mordor eventually. You don't start talking about Mordor. In fact, honestly, even with the Lord of the Rings, again, for that example, you're like, I was there the day the courage of men fail. There was a war. We won the war. There was a ring. Should have destroyed it. Didn't. That dude got killed. Ring fell in the water and action. So, yeah.
So there's a question in the chat I want to grab real quick.
Hello, Chad. Thank you for joining us.
For both of you, how do you walk back upsetting a player, even just disappointing a player? Sometimes it happens, right? It's life. Like, it depends. I don't know that you necessarily have to walk it back. I mean, it could be something that could be discussed. It depends on what exactly happened, right? I think that is very situational and specific. But I feel like almost all problems at the table begin with and end with a conversation. Just talk to each other.
Yeah, it's a collaborative art. So, my first question would be, define disappointing a player. I mean, is that they thought the story was going one way and the story was actually going a different way and just their expectations weren't met? Because that may require that doesn't require walking back at all. You're telling the story you're telling. If it's you hurt them, where I've found things like unintentionally killing or even maybe intentionally killing an NPC they really care about, for instance, can hit people in unexpected ways at times, but still pending the game, that's the game. I would just say again, all of these games are meant to be enjoyed. Even dark games, even intense games, they're meant to have fun. And I would try and do whatever I could to make sure that person is at least getting moments to experience the game that they want to play. But also understand, not every player is for every table, and that's okay. They may get in, a ways into your game and realize that, the story that you're telling and the way you're telling it is not what they want to experience. I mean, I've had that happen. But I think all things being equal, do try and preserve people's emotions, but understand everyone at the table has to have a fulfilling experience. Because I've experienced the opposite, where the one person who was out of sync and out of joint with the game that everyone else was playing and everyone else was contributing to pulled it down for everyone. And that's not good either.
No, I mean, another thing too is like checking in with your players frequently, outside of the game in order to like see how the game's going, see how people are enjoying it. So this way, like maybe you don't get to that point where you can make minor corrections along the way instead of being like, oh, wait a minute, now, people are upset or whatever, or people were disappointed because we never checked in to see how everyone was kind of doing.
Yep.
I have a question for you, going a little bit different direction. How much do dungeons play in your games?
So it's funny. I have another thing that is coming up that I'm working on that I said absolutely had to have a dungeon and absolutely has to have a dragon, because there are surprisingly few dungeons or dragons in Dungeons and Dragons. The simple answer is not a lot.
Yeah.
Not a lot, unless you like make it.
I'm just trying to figure out if it's just me or not, to be honest with you.
No, it's
Because
not.
I'm
No,
like,
it's
I'm
everybody.
like, you know, and I feel like anymore, like dragons are more likely to appear in my game than dungeons. So
No, 100%. It is not just you. It is not just you. And like so much so that when I said that was one of the design principles, everybody was like, yeah. There's surprisingly few, but I think that's also a lot the inheritance of the old, grid-based war tactical roots of the hobby, in that is a very easy way to experience this type of thing, and why it still comes up very commonly in video games for the same reason. But in a narrative setting, unless you really work at it, there's not a lot of reasons to go into the tomb of elemental evil. You're like, it's a Sararak's in there. I mean, he can stay in there. I'm not going.
Let's go trick or treating at the next door down.
Yeah, right. So I should be not in this part of the world, is what you're telling me. That's check. Yeah. No, there's surprisingly few dungeons.
Okay, we're on the same page. They definitely used to appear much more often in our earlier games. But anymore, it's like, I feel like every maybe 3 to 6, possibly, a dungeon might show up, and they're much smaller than they used to be.
Yeah. It's like you're going there in service of a greater plot. Just a total curveball backtrack, when we were talking about box sets, I think the height of the median was the Night Below box set. You ever played Night Below?
I didn't play, but I believe I owned it. So that was the Underdark box.
Yeah.
I think it was first Underdark box, like before Men's of Brands and
I don't know if it's before Men's of Brands or not, but it was very much like a sweeping epic tale of like, you got way down in there, and there was aboleths and, the Sunless Sea and all that stuff. It was just really well done, really well executed. It's funny because like 2 years ago, I was kicking around the idea of doing a stream where we kind of ran those old stories facelifted for 5th edition, because the stories are still valid, like if you can kind of like change the rules to make them compatible, and I got a little bit of traction with it, and then like it kind of just like stalled out, and I think it's because they were working on Saltmarsh, which is just that, it is facelifting some old adventures. But I was like, yeah, but there's like, the Rod of 7 Parts, the Night Below, Dragon Mountain, like all kinds of it, the old Ravenloft, Domains of Dread. Like there's so many like great old things, and a lot of those things, even though the boxes are hard to come by, a lot of the PDFs and things have been scanned, so they've still been preserved. So
I think you can get most of them on like DM's Guild and Dry Throw RPG. Also, you can get them like on print on demand, like so you can get it as an actual book, as opposed to the box that they originally came as. And 5e is like one of the easiest editions to convert to. Like I've definitely run some 3rd edition stuff straight to 5e without changing pretty much anything. It's just like all the monsters were just going to be harder because of the way the numbers scaled. So Christy has a question. How do you come back from a newbie player trying to tell me how to play my barbarian and calling it criticism? The fact that they're newbie is not relevant, but the fact that people should mind their own characters is.
Yeah, I mean, again, a lot of that comes back to what's the game that you're trying to play. I mean, I myself am an avowed min-maxer. I try and make the most numerically advantageous character that I can all the time. Now, I've been lucky enough that I've got to play enough D&D that a lot of times now I sit down and I'm like, well, what haven't I done? And then how can I make that the best that I can make it? Like this divination wizard grave cleric, that in and of itself is not necessarily optimal, but I've made the most optimal divination wizard grave cleric that I can. Because the premise of the character, what I came up with first, is he's reborn. He died and he came back, but he didn't come all back. and now he's like disjointed and out of time and has these visions of the future and is obsessed with death because he doesn't understand why he's alive. So your barbarian character, I mean, hopefully you have your character concept, and if you understand the rules, I just play the game that you're going to have fun. But again, just make sure you're playing the game that everyone else is playing as well, because I've seen both. People criticize Marisha all the time for her choices, which is weird because it's like, you do know she's objectively one of the best in the world. Like, you do know that, right? But okay, maybe you don't. So sometimes there is definitely a sexist undercurrent there where a lot of the female players get criticisms that their male associates do not get, and that's just unfortunately the way it is. The second thing to that, though, is I had an experience that I have to be vague about because you may be able to figure out what it was. But I was doing a one shot and we were having a fight. We were fighting like a necromancer, and it was like a pretty brutal fight. Like, one person was already down. All of us were less than 50 hit points. Like, I mean, like, we were not winning the fight. And one of the other people, who is apparently a comedian, was like, I'm so angry, I throw my book at them. And it's like, what? Because I want to throw the book at them. And they thought that was a hilarious gag. And the rest of us are like fighting for our lives, like, huh?
You're at the wrong table, son.
Yeah, that is not what we're here to do. Like, if you want to kill him and then, beat his corpse with the book, like, fine. But like, that's not the game the rest of us are playing. So yeah, I think as long as you are having a good time and you are in sync with what everybody else is trying to do, just be like, no, I got it. I'm good. This is, this is the character that I want to play. Because I mean, I go through this all the time, where people will tell me their concept, and in my mind I'm like, you do know this other arrangement would be a more optimal way to do the thing you just said, right? And they're like, yeah, but this is the way I want to do it. Done. Like, okay. Because it's supposed to be fun.
A lot of people would benefit from that, right? Like, and so I just hate when people tell other people how to play their characters and what to do in the game. It's like, you have your own character for a reason, right? That's your space. Stay in it. Let this other person do their thing,
Yep. Again, unless you all have like overtly, like, we have a teamwork atmosphere where, like, we're calling out to each other. Like, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Yeah, it's true. Just keep your mouth shut, especially if you're not in the scene. If your character is physically not present for events, do not comment on those events, because you're not there. Yeah.
Honestly, most of the time when that happens, I'm not even likely to pay attention because I am not there, and it'll come up later. So, and, and also, Krista, you realize it's more about them than it is you. So, play your character, and, you can politely ask them to mind their own character.
Hey, look, worst case, check in with your DM, Christy. Like, obviously you're here listening to us. You're a very smart, intelligent person, Christy. But, if like, I ran into an experience in World of Warcraft. Well, hang on, let me finish one thought and then I'll to dovetail those two things together. Check in with the DM, make sure you are playing in a way that is consistent with what the others are doing. If the DM's like, yes, keep doing your thing. If the DM's like, no, then decide if that's the game you want to play. I had an experience when I was a raid leader in WoW where, 5th edition, there is no wrong way to play 5th edition. There's just some more right ways, but there's definitely no wrong ways. In 3.5, there was wrong ways. Like, do not play that character. Like, there is no point in it. Like, your human fighter is less powerful than the druid's animal companion. In Warcraft, like, there's always, like, you have your different builds, and I haven't played it in a couple years. They might have smoothed this out, but I doubt it. That there always was a numerically superior way to do anything, and you just knew what it was. Like, this is the maximum damage build for this character. This is the most tanking you can do for this character. This is the most healing you can do for this character, and it was known. And when you go and you play the in-game content, especially when it first started, the margins of success would be so small. Like you really had to like be playing efficiently to win. Later, the gear would come out, the levels go up, and you could solo stuff that used to like crush 10 of you. But at least the first time it was really hard. And I was a raid leader and I had a guy and he was playing a hunter. And he just like, I just want to do it this other way. I want to do it this way, this like 10% less, DPS. And we're like, yeah, but we can't win like that. And he's like, well, this is supposed to be fun. And this is just how I want to do it. And we'd lose repeatedly and we just keep wiping. We get the boss nearly down and like his damage was the difference. And it's like 9 of us are pissed off, like 9 of us are objectively mad at you, for your one fun. Like that's not, it is a collaborative art, but all things being equal, I doubt that's what's happening, Christy. I think that person just needs to stay in their lane, like Dave said. But worst case, check in with the DM. If the DM's like, "No, you're good," just then do your thing.
Unfortunately, too, like tabletop RPGs are less like that anyway. Right? There's a lot more room. Like the funny thing is, on our channel, we often talk about mechanics and optimization. Mm-hmm. And often don't play that way, because it's fun to theory craft. But when we actually, and also we rag on the things that that are weaker or less optimal, and then play them all the time.
Well, because it can be fun when that's a conscious choice that you're making. I mean, Freely started as a thought experiment. Freely is a paladin, bard, warlock, sorcerer. He is a 4 multi-class. And I did it because people were like, you cannot make that work. And I was like, but I can though, because they're all charisma classes. And it works out that, some of the synergies are just magnificent of what he's capable of. But again, that is not an optimized concept, but then I have optimized him the best that I can. To me, I just judge by one basic criteria. Are your actions helping or hindering the experience of everyone else at the table? Like I said, with that throw the book example, he thought that was hilarious. I'm pissed about that now. And that game was a long time ago, because that wasn't the moment for it, but otherwise, it's if your character is just silly or maybe not just fine-tuned to the razor's edge. I mean, to me, it's things like, hey, look, when you're in combat, like I've run into experiences where people were like, my character would be scared, so I do nothing, and I'm like, I mean, that's a choice, I guess. It depends on the circumstances, because I'm like, your character is afraid, but your character is also a hero. One of the things heroes do is, be courageous and do something anyway. If you're in a situation where that gets everyone killed, maybe that's not the move. I mean, for the most part, I'm very much of the school of thought, I did it because that's what my character would do, is almost always a excuse for something you shouldn't have done.
Or it's just someone being an a-hole, really, most of the time.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, why don't you figure out something your character would do and do that, right? Or like, I've definitely had enough players like that throughout the years, and I found the best way I would play with them was to not, even if they showed up. If you're gonna do something, and the story's over here with the rest of the group, right? And that being said, like, I'm not like, you have to do this story because I'm the GM, but like the players have decided they're doing a thing, but you're that one player, like, my character wouldn't do that. Well, I'm not going to spend a bunch of time with you when I have 4 other people over here, right, that want to participate together, because that doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, it's just try and row in the same direction. And it all comes back to, yes anding things, like from improv, that you just don't say no, you try and say yes and, to go in the direction the characters are going, to go in the direction the stories are going, and find a way to do that is authentic to your character, where if it's like, well, this came up in the World of Darkness games. For the most part, werewolves are not interested in cooperating with vampires. For the most, they're not. And there'd be times where some of the werewolf characters would encounter some of the vampire characters, and it's like, we really should kill them. Like honestly, that's the reaction of the story, and yet I comprehend I'm not supposed to. So maybe my character is aware of the fact that if I kill this one, I could ignite a war between our two peoples that is going to, result in a lot of dead werewolves, in addition to some dead vampires. So for that, I got to keep my pants on for the moment. You know what I mean? Or I'm here to accomplish a greater good, and I can tolerate, the your corruption and worm taint, temporarily, to do what we have to do, and then, go on our way. Like this again, intelligent creatures behave intelligently. You can rationalize or justify anything, which is part of the reason why, I don't really do alignments anymore, because I can rationalize almost any course of action for all 9 alignments in a way that will make it make complete and total sense within the framework of that character.
I've always viewed the alignment like a dimmer switch, where it's like, there's shades of alignment. Yeah, in one of our early games, we had a character that was a magic user, because you had to earn wizard back then.
Yep.
And he really was played him like kind of like a nerdy librarian that didn't want to leave the wizard's tower, but his mentor, the wizard he was an apprentice to, kicked him out. He said, you need world experience. You don't get no more knowledge until you get experience in the world. And he played that character as someone that did not want to adventure, yet he always found ways to adventure, right? It's cool. Sure. Like, you can do those things in the game without detracting from the game. You can actually add to the game and the experience, if you do it in a way that, where you're participating.
Hey, Courage the Cowardly Dog didn't want to do any of that stuff that he had to do, Yeah, it's you just said something, and I had a thought, but I lost it. Wizard Tower, had to earn it. I don't know. I'm sure it'll come back to me in a second. Like it'll be like, I'll be laying in bed tonight and be like,
you wake up. It's
yeah.
But there's always ways to participate, even if your character wouldn't do that.
I remember what I was going to say about the alignments. I can explain the alignments in a way that'll make them make more sense. Because people are like, lawful good's the best person, chaotic evil's the worst person. Like, actually, that's not true. Lawful evil is worse than chaotic evil, but it is just a person that values, law, order, structure, society, or values, chaos in randomness, or has no preference. And when you talk about good and evil, the easiest way to think about good and evil is a spectrum of selflessness to selfishness, because that's what evil really is selfishness. That's why the measure of heroism is sacrifice, what you give up. So you have a person that really kind of is happy to let the dice fall where they fall, but a very selfless person. That person's chaotic good. That doesn't mean that suddenly you're the fish, Harry the fish guy from the Muppet Show, just like crazy and like flinging fish at people all the time that explode. It's the same thing. A chaotic evil person is, again, a person that values, chaos and randomness and is selfish. That doesn't mean that person isn't capable of actually doing something good or altruistic in the moment, but they're going to do it for their own ends. The same reason a lawful good person who values law and order and structure and is selfless still might do something friggin' terrible in the service of what they themselves perceive to be the greater good.
Yeah.
Because again, you do a lot of murder in D&D, and you do a lot of murder of things that are intelligent and have feelings, and you kill them anyway. So no one is like all that good, Yeah. So
yeah, and you get into really weird places in D&D that you can't get into in the real world. Like, furbolgs can talk to animals and plants, so that means literally everything they eat, they can communicate with, which is really weird and bizarre and kind of dark.
Yeah, you're like, can't eat rocks. That sucks. Yeah.
So we're well past the hour mark now. Final thoughts before we head on out?
This is the greatest time in history to be a geek. This is the greatest time in history to be playing these games. I think what I always like to leave people with is, if you're thinking about writing content, if you're thinking about creating games or doing a stream, do it. If you're thinking about playing, do it. Get your friends together, turn on a camera if you want, and just have some fun and make some memories, and it'll stick with you for the rest of your life. And there's no wrong way to play the game. Even when we talk about like optimal and things like that, it's just what's making sense at that table. You know, what's the experience those players are trying to have and that GM is trying to create. And when that synchronizes, it is magical.
Absolutely great advice, and thanks for coming on. These go by so fast, and I could just listen to you talk all day long. It's a pleasure to have you on. Check out the links in the description, and until next time, stay nerdy. We are